It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? To say you're divorcing your husband because he eats too much, because he eats everything that isn't nailed down. But here I am, Emily, a working mother of two, staring at the empty cake stand, the remnants of what was supposed to be my twin son's birthday cake, and realizing this isn't about food at all. This is about a betrayal so deep, so constant, that it has hollowed out my marriage and left nothing but a bez. And left nothing but a bed. 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 And law in my marriage, and left nothing but a bed. This year now, just as about is. Mark, my husband of 6 years, has finally pushed me to the edge, and I'm divorcing him. Not for the calories, but for the profound, soul-crushing disregard he has shown for me, for our children, and for the very fabric of our family. The final, undeniable proof that Mark wouldn't change, that only divorce could fix this, came on the eve of Jason and Michael's 6th birthday. I had promised them a homemade cake, a special one with their favorite fillings. They picked out the flavors, their eyes shining with anticipation. I worked late after they were asleep, because during the day, between work and childcare, there was simply no time. I baked the layers, prepared the jello filling, baked the layers, prepared the jello filling, the jello filling, dang, at jello tap the mine. My baked the layers, prepared the jello filling, It was a labor of love, a sacrifice of sleep, but worth it for the joy on their faces. I planned to sleep for a couple of hours, then wake up early to whip the frosting and decorate it. I pictured their excitement, their little hands reaching for slices of their very own birthday cake. My alarm blared at 5 a.m., a cruel awakening after only a few hours of fitful sleep. I dragged myself to the kitchen, ready to transform my baked goods into a masterpiece. But as I rounded the corner, my heart sank, then plummeted into my stomach with a sickening thud. The cake stand was empty. The cooling racks, where the layers had been, were bare. The jello mold, the little decorative figures I'd bought, all gone. Vanished. The boys were still asleep, their innocent dreams undisturbed. But their cake, their birthday cake, was gone. I called Mark, my hands trembling, a cold fury rising in my chest. He answered, his voice groggy, completely oblivious to the earthquake that had just hit my world. "The cake, Mark," I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "Where's the boy's birthday cake?" A pause. Then, casually, "Oh yeah, I ate it. It was delicious." Delicious. He'd eaten their birthday cake. Not a slice, not a piece, but the entire thing, without a second thought. And then, the ultimate insult, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage, I took the rest to work. What was I supposed to eat for breakfast? He said it with a hint of accusation, as if I were the one who had wronged him. As if his hunger, his breakfast, was more important than his children's birthday. It was my fault, of course. Always my fault. The boys woke up to no cake. Their disappointment, their quiet, confused sadness, was a dagger to my heart. That was it. I started packing. Not just their clothes, but mine too. We were going to my mom's. And then, I was filing for divorce. My mother-in-law and Mark still believe I'm overreacting, that people don't divorce over food. But it's not about the food. It's about how he shows, every single day, how little he cares about us, about me. My own father, a man who worked tirelessly to provide for us, once pretended for 10 years that he didn't like sweets, just so I would get more. I only found out years later that he had a massive sweet tooth. He just didn't have money for 2 pastries, so he bought one for me. That's love. That's care. That's a father. Mark? Mark only thinks about himself, his own comfort, his own immediate desires. And while I, personally, might have found a way to live with it, perhaps even found a perverse silver lining in never gaining weight, my children deserve better. They deserve to live in a home where they are cherished, where their needs are met, and where they are not constantly reminded that their own father disregards them. This divorce isn't about food. It's about dignity, respect, and the fundamental right of my children to feel loved and prioritized. Prioritize them. The initial shock of the cake incident had settled into a cold, hard resolve. But leaving wasn't as simple as packing a bag and walking out the door. There were logistics, finances, and the crushing weight of explaining to two small boys why their dad wasn't coming home. My mother, bless her heart, welcomed us with open arms, her small bungalow instantly transforming into a sanctuary. But even there, the ghost of Mark's gluttony lingered, a constant reminder of the life we'd left behind. I started the divorce proceedings, a daunting, emotionally draining process. Mark, predictably, was indignant. He painted me as hysterical, overly sensitive, and a woman who couldn't appreciate a man with a healthy appetite. His mother, true to form, echoed his sentiments, calling me regularly to lament how I was tearing their family apart over just food. It was a constant barrage designed to chip away at my resolve. But the image of Jason and Michael's crestfallen faces on their birthday, the empty cake stand, was burned into my memory, a shield against their accusations. It was during this tumultuous period that the first crack appeared in my perception of Mark's thoughtlessness. I was going through our joint bank statements, trying to untangle our finances for the divorce lawyer. We had always been careful with money, every penny accounted for. But there were these recurring, small, almost insignificant charges. A few dollars here, $10 there, from convenience stores and gas stations that I didn't rev from convenience stores and gas stations that I didn't rev. That would go life higher. From the convenience stores and gas stations that I didn't ring, from convenience stores and gas stations that I didn't raise in that hour. At first, I dismissed them as minor expenses, maybe a coffee or a snack on his way to work. But they were too frequent, too consistent, and they didn't align with his usual spending patterns. Some might call me dramatic. They might say I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, that food is a trivial reason to end a marriage. But they haven't lived my life. They haven't seen the slow, insidious erosion of trust, the constant battle against an unseen enemy in my own home. They haven't watched their children's faces fall when a promised treat vanishes, or felt the gnawing anxiety of a fridge empty days before payday, all because one man couldn't control his appetite, or rather, wouldn't control his selfishness. This isn't about a few extra pounds. It's about a man who prioritizes his immediate gratification over the well-being and happiness of his entire family. It's about a man who, in his hunger, devoured not just our meals, but our peace, our security, and ultimately our future together. Mark and I met in college, a whirlwind romance that felt destined for a storybook ending. He was charming, larger than life, with an infectious laugh and a hearty appetite that, back then, I found endearing. We built a life together in a quiet suburb of Chicago, a cozy house with a mortgage that felt like a badge of honor, a testament to our shared dreams. Then came Jason and Michael, our twin boys, now almost 6. Bundles of energy and Jason, bundles of energy and give me a beer. On the surface, we were the picture of American normalcy. 2 working parents, 2 beautiful kids, a home filled with laughter and the usual chaos. But beneath that veneer, a quiet war was being waged. A war fought over dinner plates and grocery bills. A war I was losing. For 6 years, I've been battling Mark's insatiable appetite. It started subtly, a missing snack here, an extra helping there. I'd cook a large pot of chili, enough to last a week, and by the next evening, it would be gone, scraped clean from the pot. The bread, the fruit, the leftovers, all vanished. He's a big guy, yes, broad-shouldered and tall, but not obese. He just eats, constantly. And without a shred of consideration for anyone, and without a shred of consideration for anyone, and without a shred of consideration for anyone, and without a shred of consideration for anyone of the exoder. Mark, I'd say, the boys need their fruit for school lunches, or that chili was supposed to last us until Friday. He'd look at me with wide, innocent eyes, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "Oops, I didn't think," he'd mumble, or "I thought you'd already eaten." At first, I found it almost sweet, his childlike admission of guilt. But the years wore on, and the oops became a cruel joke, a punchline to a tragedy that was rearranged. Our finances were always tight, especially after we bought the house. The mortgage ate up a significant chunk of our income, leaving us with a modest amount to stretch across the month for groceries, utilities, and the boys' needs. Every dollar was accounted for, every meal planned. I'd spend hours couponing, meal prepping, trying to make ends meet. But it was a futile exercise when Mark would systematically dismantle my efforts. I'd make a big batch of lasagna, carefully portioning it for dinners throughout the week. If I didn't eat it immediately after cooking, it was gone. The same with meatballs, chicken, even the small, precious containers of fruit puree I bought for the boys when they were toddlers. He ate it all, without fail. It wasn't just annoying, it was financially devastating and emotionally draining. The arguments became a regular occurrence, always circular, always ending with me feeling unheard and him feeling unjustly accused. "We need to eat too, Mark," I'd shout, my voice cracking with frustration. "You eat everything in one sitting and you don't think about anyone else." He'd puff himself up, his face reddening, not with shame, but with indignation. "You need to cook more, Emily," he'd retort. "I'm starving." Starving? He was a grown man, well-fed, and yet he spoke as if I were depriving him. Cook more? Unless I started cooking in industrial-sized vats, there was no more to be had. A 5-gallon pot of anything barely lasted a day in our house. I even tried to involve his mother, my mother-in-law, a sweet but utterly oblivious woman who adored her son. I hoped she might talk some sense into him, explain the concept of sharing, of responsibility. But she just smiled, a faraway look in her eyes, and said, "Oh, my Marky always had such a healthy appetite. You couldn't keep him away from the food." She dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. "It's just food, dear. You make concerns with a wave of her hand. It's just food, dear. You make. As if food wasn't sustenance, wasn't a symbol of care, wasn't a constant source of stress and deprivation in our home. As if my children's hunger was nothing. But it is a tragedy, you know? Try not to get furious when your husband, the father of your children, eats all the chicken nuggets you bought for their lunch, leaving them with plain rice because payday is still 5 days away, and the fridge is bare. For me, it was one thing. I could skip a meal, make do. But my boys? They needed proper nutrition, growing bodies and minds. And their own father was actively undermining that, taking food directly from Milden and taking food directly from Milnu, drinking food directly from Merlims. It was a constant gnawing pain, a silent scream that echoed through our seemingly normal suburban home. I grew exhausted, not just physically from the endless cooking and cleaning and working, but emotionally. I started buying groceries and secretly taking a portion to my mom's house, a small bungalow just a few towns over. It was humiliating sneaking food out of my own home, but it was the only way I could ensure my children had access to fresh fruit, a decent piece of meat, or a sweet treat without it vanishing. My mom, bless her heart, never asked questions, just opened her arms in her pantry. But how much could I really buy on my salary after all the bills were paid? It felt like I was constantly bailing water out of a sinking ship, and the leak was my own husband. Then came twist 3. I received a call from a mutual acquaintance, a woman named Lisa who worked with Mark. She sounded uncomfortable, almost apologetic. "Emily, I don't know if I should be telling you this," she began, "but Mark's been talking about you." My heart pounded. I braced myself. He's been telling everyone at work that you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're overly emotional and can't handle the stress of being a woe. No handle the stress of being a woe. Deude with the A's to being a woe. For stress of being a woe. Oh, being a what? Stress of being a woe. He said you'd become obsessed with his eating habits, that you're trying to control every aspect of his life, and that you're making false accusations to justify leaving him. I felt a cold, sickening dread spread through me. He wasn't just dismissing my feelings. He was actively poisoning my reputation, twisting the narrative to make me look like the unstable one. He was painting me as the villain, the irrational wife, while he, the poor, misunderstood husband, was merely trying to cope with my demands. This wasn't just selfishness. This was a calculated smear campaign. He was trying to isolate me, to make others doubt my sanity, to ensure that if anyone heard my side of the story, they would already be predisposed to disbelieve me. It was a gut punch, a confirmation of his manipulative nature. He wasn't just indifferent, he was actively malicious. The man I had loved, the father of my children, was systematically trying to destroy my credibility. It was a chilling realization, one that stripped away any lingering doubts I might have had about the necessity of this divorce. There was no going back, no hope of reconciliation with a man so deeply entrenched in his own self-serving delusions. My character development was accelerating. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was a fighter, a protector. My dialogue with Mark, when it happened, became clipped, factual, devoid of emotion. I refused to engage with his attempts to provoke or deflect. I focused on the boys, on rebuilding our lives, on creating a new normal free from his toxic influence. I found strength in my mother's quiet support, in Sarah's fierce loyalty, and most importantly, in the unwavering love I had for my sons. They deserved a mother who was strong, clear-headed, and capable of protecting them, even from their own father's subtle cruelties. The subplots of financial strain continued to weave through our lives, but now with a different urgency. I was determined to secure a stable future for my boys, and that meant fighting for every penny in the divorce. The mortgage on the Chicago suburban home, once a symbol of our dreams, now felt like a burden, a tether to a past I desperately wanted to shed. My mother's small bungalow, while a temporary refuge, was not a permanent soya. Was not a permanent sabanet shovedhem savire chum dizolkin, so answer bolvin. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet for my children's sake. It was during one particularly difficult evening, after a contentious phone call with Mark's lawyer, that I found myself staring out the window, watching Jason and Michael play in my mom's small backyard. They were laughing, chasing fireflies, their innocence a stark contrast to the ugliness swirling around them. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but beneath it, a fierce determination. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them. It was about breaking the cycle, about teaching them what true love and respect looked like, even if it meant tearing apart the only family structure they had ever known. I thought about all the other families, the untold stories behind closed doors, the silent battles fought over things that seemed trivial to outsiders but were, in fact, symptoms of deeper dysfunctions. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us, isn't it? How the private struggles of one household can echo the hidden pains of so many others. If this story is getting under your skin, if you've ever felt like you were fighting a battle no one else understood, subscribe for more real family exposés. There are so many truths waiting to be uncovered, so many silent cries waiting to be heard. It felt natural, a moment of shared vulnerability in the midst of my struggle, a way to connect with others who might be navigating their own hidden battles. The air in my mother's small living room was thick with the unspoken. Jason and Michael, usually boisterous and full of questions, were subdued. They played quietly with the toys I had managed to retrieve from our house, their small faces etched with a confusion that mirrored my own. I watched them, my heart aching with a fierce protectiveness. Everything I was doing, every painful step, was for them, to give them a life free from the subtle, corrosive neglects. It was a Tuesday, 2 days after the birthday cake massacre. Mark had called. his voice laced with an artificial calm, suggesting we need to talk things over. He proposed a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my mom's house and his office. I agreed, steeling myself for another round of his gaslighting and blame shifting. But this time, I was different. The veil had been lifted. I saw him for what he was, not what I had wanted him to ever what I had wanted him to. I wanted him to, except I wanted him to tutor him. And Lord, I arrived first, nursing a lukewarm latte, my hands clenched round the ceramic mug. When Mark walked in, he looked exactly the same. Unchanged, unburdened. He offered a perfunctory smile, pulled out a chair, and sat opposite me. No apology, no hint of remorse. Just a practiced air of weary patience, as if I were the difficult one. I were the one making his life unnecessarily complicated. "Emily," he began, his voice smooth, almost condescending. "This has gone on long enough. The boys miss their home. I miss you. Can't we just talk about this rationally?" "Rationally?" I echoed, my voice barely a whisper, but laced with an edge of ice. "Mark, you ate our son's birthday cake. The entire thing. And then you blamed me for not providing you with breakfast." He sighed, a long-suffering sound. "Emily, it was just a cake. A piece of dessert. Are we really going to let a piece of cake destroy our family?" "It wasn't just a cake, Mark," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It was their birthday. It was a promise. It was hours of my time after working all day, trying to make something special for them. And you devoured it without a second thought, without a shred of remorse. And then you took the leftovers to work so you could continue to indulge yourself while our children woke up to nothing." He leaned back, crossing his arms, a familiar defensive posture. "I was hungry, Emily. You know I have a big appetite. And frankly, you're always so dramatic about food. If you had just made enough, there wouldn't have been a problem." That was it. The sheer audacity, the complete lack of self-awareness, the unwavering belief in his own blamelessness. It wasn't just the cake, it was the entire history of our marriage, flashing before my eyes. The empty pots, the missing snacks, the constant financial strain, but he always found a way to justify his selfishness, to turn it back on me. This wasn't a man who would ever change. This was a man who saw no fault in himself, own himself. This was a man who saw no fault in himself. "Oh, no fault." "You know," I said, my voice steady now, devoid of anger, filled instead with a chilling clarity. "My dad used to pretend he didn't like sweets. For 10 years, he'd pass up desserts saying he wasn't a sweets person, just so my brother and I would get more. I only found out years later he had a massive sweet tooth. He just didn't have money for 2 pastries, so he bought one for me." I looked him directly in the eyes. That's what it. He thinks of his children first. You ate your son's birthday cake and then blamed me for it." The words hung in the air, a stark, undeniable truth. Mark's composure finally cracked. A flicker of something, shame, anger, crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by a familiar defensiveness. "What does your father have to do with anything? This is about us, Emily, not some idealized version of parenthood. You're being completely unreasonable." "No, Mark," I said, shaking my head slowly. "I'm being reasonable. I'm finally seeing clearly. This isn't about food. It's about respect. It's about care. It's about the fact that you consistently prioritize your own comfort, your own immediate desires over the well-being of your family. You don't see us. You only see yourself." His eyes narrowed. "So, this is it? You're really going to throw away our marriage, our family, over this?" He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything and nothing. "I'm not throwing it away, Mark," I corrected him, my voice firm. "I'm saving what's left of it. I'm saving my children from growing up with a father who teaches them that their needs don't matter, that their joy is secondary to his hunger. I'm saving myself from a life where I'm constantly fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be valued." Leaving Mark in that coffee shop, his face a mask of bewildered indignation, felt like shedding a heavy E. The air outside, though still the same Chicago autumn chill, suddenly felt crisper, cleaner. It wasn't just the end of a conversation, it was the end of an era, the definitive severing of a tie that had bound me to a constant state of emotional depletion. The walk back to my car was not a retreat, but a march forward, each step imbued with a newfound sense of purpose. But the clarity, while liberating, was also accompanied by a profound I made 6 years of my life, of our children's lives, spent in this emotional tug-of-war. The man I had loved, the man I had built a home with, was fundamentally incapable of the reciprocal love and respect that a true partnership demands. It wasn't a flaw I could fix or a habit he could break. It was intrinsic to who he was. And accepting that truth, as painful as it was the real game changer. I called Sarah from the car, my voice steady, though a tremor of residual emotion still ran beneath the surface. "It's done," I told her. I told him, "There's no going back." She listened, her usual effervescent energy subdued, offering quiet words of affirmation and support. Her understanding, her unwavering belief in me, was a lifeline in these turbulent waters. She didn't try to minimize my pain or offer platitudes. She simply acknowledged the enormity of what I had just done. Driving back to my mom's, I thought about the boys, Jason and Michael. They were too young to fully grasp the complexities of divorce, but they weren't too young to feel the tension, the quiet despair that had permeated our home. They deserved a childhood free from the anxiety of whether there would be enough food, enough attention, enough love and enough love. They deserved a parent who saw them, truly saw them, and prioritized their well-being above all else. That parent, I realized with a fierce certainty, was going to be me. Mark's reaction, or rather, his lack of genuine reaction, continued to replay in my mind. His immediate defensiveness, his quick pivot to blame, his inability to even feign remorse for the cake incident, it was all a testament to his deeply ingrained narcissism. That parent to his deeply ingrained narcissism. The parent to his European narcissism. Mark's parent to his immediate narcissism. His ambiguous situation. He genuinely believed he was the aggrieved party, the victim of my unreasonable demands. This was the psychological depth of our confrontation. It wasn't about who was right or wrong in an argument, it was about two people operating from entirely different moral and emotional universes. His universe revolved solely around himself, mine around my children. The defining character transformation moment wasn't a sudden epiphany, but the culmination of years of small betrayals, culminating in the birthday cake. It was the slow, agonizing process of peeling back the layers of denial, of confronting the uncomfortable truth that the man I married was not the man I thought he was. And in that confrontation, I found my own strength. I shed the skin of the accommodating wife, the one who always tried to me, the one who always tried to me, the one who always tried to me is quit. I emerged as a woman who knew her worth, who understood her boundaries, and who was prepared to fight for the future she and her children deserved. I spent the evening with my boys, baking cookies with my mom, filling the small kitchen with the scent of vanilla and sugar, a stark contrast to the emptiness of 2 nights prior. Their laughter, their sticky fingers, their innocent joy were a balm to my raw emotions. This was what I was fighting for. The The was fighting for. The not that what. The first day of death. The was Mark wouldn't make it easy. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm, a quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing. The thought of Mark, sitting alone, perhaps still stewing in his self-pity, no longer held the power to wound me. His inability to comprehend the gravity of his actions was his burden, not mine. My burden was to heal, to rebuild, to create a new, healthier foundation for my children. And I was entombed and free in. And I was, this moment, this profound shift in my perception and resolve, was the true climax. The external events were merely reflections of the internal earthquake that had reshaped my world. The divorce was, as expected, messy. Mark fought it every step of the way, clinging to his distorted reality where he was the victim and I, the irrational aggressor. But the evidence of his financial deceit, the secret stashes of gourmet food, and the sheer volume of his self-serving behavior painted a clear picture for the courts. It wasn't just about the cake, it was about a pattern of profound disregard. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had likely seen it all, granted me full custody and a fair settlement, recognizing the emotional and financial strain Mark had imposed on our family. It was a vivre posed on our family. It was a financial strain now. It was a vime and financial family. It was a vibe and hence a strain Mark had imposed into several Collins. The end of a marriage, even a toxic one, is never truly cause for celebration. Life in my mom's, initially a temporary refuge, slowly began to feel like a new normal. The boys thrived in the stability and peace. My mom, a quiet force of nature, provided the unwavering support I desperately needed. We established new routines, new traditions. Dinners were no longer a source of anxiety, but a time for connection and laughter. The fridge was always stocked, not with an abundance of food, but with enough, carefully planned and lovingly prepared. It was a small, quiet revolution in our lives. My character growth during this period was immense. I found a strength I never knew I possessed. The constant emotional labor of managing Mark's insatiable appetite and bottomless selfishness had drained me for years. Now, with that burden lifted, I felt a surge of energy, clear. I started taking evening classes, pursuing a long dormant interest in graphic design. It was challenging, exhilarating, and a reminder that I was more than just a mother and a wife. I was an individual with my own dreams and aspirations. One evening, while the boys were asleep and my mom was watching her favorite show, I sat at the kitchen table, sketching designs for a new project. The house was quiet, filled with the gentle hum of the refrigerator. A sense of profound peace settled over me. It was a peace I hadn't realized I had lost, a peace that had been devoured, along with everything else, by Mark's relentless hunger. Now, it was mine again. I launched my graphic design business a few months later, starting small, taking on freelance projects. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The first time a client paid me for a logo I had designed, I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with validation. I was creating something beautiful, something meaningful, something entirely my own. It was a far cry from the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning and budgeting that had defined my previous life. Mark, predictably, continued to be Mark. He'd occasionally call, usually to complain about the child support or to make some thinly veiled attempt to guilt-trip me. I learned to keep our conversations brief, factual, and emotionally detached. The man I once loved was a ghost, a memory of a person who never truly existed. The real Mark was the one who prioritized his own hunger above all else, and that Mark had no place in my new life. One day, Jason, now 7, came home from Seoul and yet to keep home from Seoul. It was a picture of our new home with me, him, Michael, and Grandma smiling in the yard. In the corner, almost as an afterthought, was a tiny stick figure man, looking sad and alone. "That's Daddy," Jason explained, pointing to the stick figure. "He's sad because he doesn't have any cake." My heart ached for a moment, but then I looked at the rest of the drawing, the bright sun, the colorful flowers, the happy faces. My boys were bowers, the happy faces. My boys were burly mom. My boys were boinlings, my victim slab. I realized then that my journey wasn't just about escaping a bad marriage. It was about rediscovering myself, about building a life rooted in genuine love, respect, and self-worth. It was about teaching my sons, through example, that they deserve to be cherished, that their needs were important, and that true happiness comes from within, not from external validation or fleeting gratification. My story is not unique. So many of us, especially women, find ourselves in relationships where our needs are consistently overlooked, where our emotional labor goes unappreciated, and where we slowly lose ourselves in the process of trying to keep everyone else happy. But there comes a point, a breaking point, where we realize that our own well-being and the well-being of our children must come first. It's not selfish, it's necessary. If you've resonated with Emily's journey, if you've ever felt like you're constantly giving and getting nothing in return, then consider this. What small step can you take today to reclaim a piece of yourself? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, or reach out to a trusted friend or professional. Your story matters, and your happiness is worth fighting for. It transforms my personal narrative into a universal message of empower. It transforms my personal narrative into a universal message of empower. My impersonal the turns imperative into a universal message of empower. My life isn't perfect. There are still challenges, still moments of doubt. But now I face them with a clear head, a strong heart, and the unwavering love of my children and my mother. The empty cake stand, once a symbol of betrayal, is now just a memory, replaced by the sweet scent of freshly baked cookies and the quiet joy of a home filled with peace. And that, I realized, was more delicious than any cake could ever be. The graphic design business, initially a side hustle, blossomed into a thriving enterprise. My unique perspective, honed by years of meticulous budgeting and creative problem-solving in my personal life, translated into a sharp, efficient design process that clients appreciated. I specialized in branding for small, women-owned businesses, pouring my own journey of empowerment into every logo, every website layout. It wasn't just work, it was a mission. I often found myself sharing snippets of my story not as a cautionary tale, but as an inspiration, a testament to resilience. Many of my clients, I discovered, had their own marked stories, their own battles against unseen forces that had tried to diminish them. We formed a quiet sisterhood, a network of women lifting each other up, building their dreams brick by painstaking brick. Jasa, 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 Andres, as Nifurka, Jasa. Plus, I'm wishing all again, seeking brick. Jasa. They were confident, kind, and deeply empathetic boys. They understood, in their own way, the changes that had reshaped our family. We talked openly about feelings, about respect, about the importance of sharing and consideration. Lessons that, ironically, their father had failed to teach them. They still saw Mark occasionally, supervised visits that were often strained and awkward. He remained largely unchanged, still self-absorbed, still prone to complaining about his perceived injustices. But his presence no longer cast a shadow over our lives. He was a distant figure, a part of their past, not their present or future. My mother, my rock, continued to be an invaluable presence. Her quiet strength, her unconditional love had been the anchor that kept me from drifting during the storm. We often sat on her porch in the evenings, sipping tea, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. She'd tell me stories of her own struggles, her own triumphs, reminding me that resilience was a legacy, a thread woven through generations of women in our family. I was not alone. I had never been alone. Looking back, the cake incident, the catalyst for such profound change, now seemed almost insignificant in its own right. It wasn't the cake that broke us, it was the culmination of years of emotional neglect, of a fundamental imbalance that had slowly suffocated our marriage. The cake was merely the final, undeniable proof that something had to give. And in its absence, a new, more fulfilling life had emerged, one built on authenticity, respect, and genuine connection. I often thought about the anonymous comments on my story, the outpouring of support, the outpouring of support, the outpouring of support, the outpouring of support, the shifting and hacks. It was a powerful reminder that our individual struggles, when brought into the light, can become collective strengths. Each like, each share, each heartfelt message was a validation, not just of my story, but of the universal human need for dignity and respect. The viral drama had become a viral movement, a quiet revolution of self-worth. And so, Emily, once defined by what she lacked, by what was taken from her, was now defined by what she had built: a thriving business, 2 happy, well-adjusted sons, a supportive family, and a newfound sense of self. The hunger that once plagued her home had been replaced by an abundance of peace, love, and purpose. And that, she realized, was the most satisfying feast of all.